Hi folks, my name is Mr. Kuchak and I am your art teacher. Before we begin, let me go over our class rules. We have 3 rules at Elk Lake. Be ready, be responsible, be respectful. We are ready in the art room when we come in, sit in our assigned seats, and get quiet so that we can learn about art. We are responsible in the art room when we follow directions and take care of our supplies, and we clean up any of our messes. We are respectful when we use kind words like please and thank you, and when we value other students' artwork. Supplies you will need for today's lesson. Go ahead and pause the video if you need to. Hi folks, today we are going to be working on the next part of our picture. So far we've done our lines, which are 1D, we've done our shapes, which are 2D, and we just finished up with our forms, which are 3D. We also did our value, which helps us make the forms look 3D. So our next part that we're going to go into is the part next to the T, and that's going to be where the texture is going to go. So texture is how artists draw something the way it feels. So if you think of, say, a cactus, we're not going to draw it soft and fluffy like a cloud. We're instead going to draw it so that it looks like it's pokey. So let me show you some examples of texture, and I will flip my camera and then we'll get started. Thank you. So texture is mostly drawn using lines, and when we draw them out, we want to make sure that each texture is on each item. So for example, if we use something like a fluffy texture for our clouds, we don't want to use a fluffy kind of line in our rocks. We want to make them look different and unique. I kind of think of texture as an adjective. It's used to describe what's going on in your picture. So let's just go over a few common ones. So we've talked about fluffy. So when we're drawing these out, we're going to use a little bit more of a curved line. We may have other lines inside, but we'd like to make it look like it is fluffy and floating around. We can also do something, say, kind of rough, like a piece of wood. So if we have a piece of wood, just make that look a little bit 3D so that we can practice our forms. We can add things like knots into our wood, so that we have kind of like the wood grain inside there. Notice it's different from the fluffy. I'm not using fluffy lines in there. I'm using unique lines to this so that when we draw, especially when we draw using things like texture, we want to make sure each one is unique to the item so that we're saying, okay, this is where it's rough, this is where it's fluffy. Another one that we have is woven. So things like a screen or things like clothing or fabric. If we use cross hatching where we go back and forth, we can make it look like it's woven. Things that are like a puppy dog. We might have some hair. So if we use a little bit longer lines, we can have that inside there for hair. We might have things that are sandy. So sandy has kind of a grit to it. So we would use the tip of our pencils and we could add in the sand into our picture. We can do things that are like pokey, like a cactus. So let's draw that cactus out, and then we're going to add the pokes. If it looks too much like something else in there, you could always add other sides to it so that it's a little bit pokier. So we have thorns coming out every direction. So if it looks too much like, say, you have an animal in there and it looks like fur, then switch it up a little bit. Add a little bit different design to it to make it stand out, to make it look unique, and to make it look like it is pokey. We could also do something scaly. So if we have something like a dragon or a fish or a snake, You know, we might need that scale pattern. We can always go back in and we can add other designs in there to make it stand out a little bit more. But overall, those scales are going to overlap right on top of each other. We might need something that is rocky or like brick-like. So if we're doing bricks, bricks have a pattern to them. So we normally do a row of bricks, and then we go in between for our next ones. So they go in between, and then we have our next set, and then we have our next set that goes over those. So if you're drawing a building and you want it to look like brick, you can add those right inside there. You might have something that is wet, so it might be raindrops coming down from the cloud. So it might be that type of wet. Or it might be, say, like a cube that is melting. So if you have that cube that is melting, you might be making a puddle. So you might need that type of stuff kind of coming through there. It might be also water. So rivers have the waves, or the ocean has their waves as their texture, so that we can look at that and say, oh yeah, that's definitely a wave. We might have things that are bumpy. So if you have hills, what you want to make sure you do is you want to make sure each one is unique. So we don't want it to start right at the bottom. We want to start halfway back up so that they look like they're bumps. Same thing with mountains that are pokey. If we come up, you know, and then if you're adding things like snow caps on the top, you can add those inside there too. We can also do things that are shiny or slick, say like an astronaut's visor. They have a piece of glass protecting them, so we can just add a little bit of a reflection line on there to show that it is shiny. Same thing with like a bubble. So if we have a bubble and we curve, connect, that's going to show that it kind of reflects off of that too. And two more that we have here. This one is going to be peeling. So if I have something that's, say, cut into this, like with claws, or paint is peeling off, I normally do like a blobby shape. So I'm just kind of wiggling my pencil a little bit, and then from the bottom I curl, and then I curl back. I curl, and I curl back, and then that way it looks like it's been peeled open. And the last one that we have is our Rocky. So with Rocky, I normally do a lumpy bumpy shape. Could be a couple lumpy bumpy shapes, and then we just bring the sides down. So bring them down, and then lumpy bumpy connect. Connect, connect. So then it will look like there's rocks, and that there's some rocks behind other rocks. That way we can get all of our shapes and we can get all of our stuff in there. So once we have all of this texture, now we can put it into our picture. So let's work on a picture together. Let me switch papers. Okay, for our next part here, I'm going to be working in this box here where the T is. So I'm just going to outline this a little bit so that you can see exactly where I'm at, so that you can see that I'm over here in this section. So what I'm going to do, since I can get a lot of different textures in with a desert picture, I'm going to start off doing a desert picture. So we're going to start off with some clouds. So we're going to do a fluffy texture up on top. And we might want to do a few other clouds in there too. Now, you can change the type of day that it is. So if it's a sunny day, you might want to put a sun in there. If it's a rainy day, you might want to do that. If it's a lightning, stormy day, you might want to do something like that. But I'm going to do a little bit of a sunny day in there. So I'm going to add some sun rays in there. I can even wiggle my Sharpie a little bit to do some kind of curvy rays in between to make it look like it's really hot in the desert there. Then I'm going to come down here next, and I'm going to add in my plateaus. So plateaus are flat-topped mountains. So I'm going to come in and come down. Now the whole trick is to walk halfway back up this hill. Do your next hill, come down, walk halfway back up, come down, walk halfway back up, and come down. Now what we have is we have all of our hills. So the next thing I want to do is I want to add a little bit of ground line here so I know where my ground is. This way I have hills, and then I have places here where I can draw. Now before I draw anything in here, I want to put in a road. And the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to just use a couple fingers here, maybe 4 fingers, and I'm going to make a little mark here on the side of my paper. Over here where the ground touches, that's a great spot. Now, if it doesn't touch over here too close to you, just make another little dot there, but make it only like 1 finger width. And then we connect. So we're going to connect to that line and that line. That way we have our road coming down the side. And then our road is going to need things like the lines that go down a road. So we want to make these bigger, and then these we want smaller because they're further away. This way it'll look like we have a little bit of an illusion going on. Now we'll talk a little bit more about this when we get to space, on why converging lines work so well. So inside here next, we need some other texture. So I'm going to do a Sakura cactus. So I'm going to start off with a smile, and then I'm going to go up and down, and then I'm going to do some arms coming up. Should look like someone with their hands up. Once you have that done, then you can draw in your texture. So I'm going to draw in some of the pokies on there. So we can add those all in there. Now, I had a teacher who would always say, you know, draw trees and things in threes. So I will go through, I will add a couple more kind of plant-like items in there. So some of them might be far away though. So way back here I might do like a prickly pear cactus, so that it has a little bit more like a leaf shape to it. And then I'm going to add some pokies in there. So those are a little bit smaller. Or I might do something like a barrel cactus over here where it has, maybe I'll use those forked thorns on there. Now once I have that done, now I can start adding in some more texture. So maybe on the side of the road it's kind of gravelly, so I would take my pencil or my marker, whatever you're using to draw, and I would add some gravel on the side of the road. You know, there might be something like a tumbleweed way back in the background. So I would add my tumbles and then have stuff sticking out of it, almost like a hay bale, where some of the scratchy stuff is sticking out. I might do a snake sunning itself on the road. So I would use the letter S. Now the trick with the snake is we want to follow that same exact shape up to the head. So the head, that's going to determine how big the body is. So I'm going to start off with a 7, and I'm going to finish with an L. That way I know I have to get to there. So I want this a rattlesnake, so I'm going to do a little bit of a curve there. And then I'm going to start back here, and I'm going to follow up. So as my snake goes up, I go up. As it comes down, it comes down. And then I connect the tail. I can add the rattles in there. So I'm going to use a little bit of a zigzaggy line to make it stand out a little bit more. I'm going to add in the eyes, maybe the tongue. And then I'm going to add in my scales. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to add all my scales into there, because that's a great texture that we can add in to our picture. You know, things like feathers, scales, fur, all of those are great tools that we can use when we're adding texture in there. And then I'm going to look, and maybe I add a little bit of water back here. Maybe there's a little bit of a waterfall. So I can add some water kind of coming down behind these, and maybe it's flowing into like a river back here. or a creek. Maybe it just got done raining. So we have some stuff there. You can go through, if you have more room, you can add in things like lizards, you can add in things like birds, you can add in other things that you think are missing. You know, if there's an old sign sticking up out of the ground, or just even an old board or fence post. And you want it peeling, you know, you could do stuff like that. If you want to make it look like it's wood, and or maybe there's a wire, barbed wire in there, kind of sticking out of it, like it's an old fence post or old pasture that just stopped being a pasture. We can add that kind of stuff too in there. So think of different textures, think of different lines that you can use, and you can add them right into your picture. Good luck, have a good night.